Oh, he private chat said, okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
welcome. Oh, we're here. We're recording. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of This is Tech Talks. This is episode 16. Today, I don't know this guy very well, i.e., we met about 35 seconds ago, but he is full-time into something that I am really passionate about, so I'm really excited to talk to him about open source, how to get into it full-time, probably touch on how to just contribute to it in general and like what that means and what it means to be a full-time open source contributor. So Josh, why don't you go ahead? I see you just put some food in your mouth.
Joke's on you. I swallowed it. Hey everyone, thanks for having me, Jay. And from the shadows, Santosh. I'm Josh Goldberg. I'm really excited to be here and talking about open source. I've been a full-time open source developer for, I think, a little over 2 years now. Prior to that, I was at Codecademy, prior to that, Microsoft. So I've seen a nice little spread of the industry, and I'm always happy to talk about it.
Nice. Yeah, I looked you up on Twitter before this, and you're the maintainer of TypeScript ESLint, and then obviously you probably contribute to ESLint as well. I would
yes.
Say, right? Yeah.
Yep, I'm one of the contributors to ESLint. I'm on the committer team, and I'm one of the maintainers of TypeScript ESLint. I'm on the maintainer team there.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's sweet. So did you do a lot of open source when you were at Microsoft? And you say Codecademy, right? That was the other one? Or
yes.
Codecademy, yeah, okay.
Yeah, fun fact, there's no A in the middle. It's just Codecademy. This trips up everyone. We actually used to have a running joke in the office about it because everyone would invite us to meetings saying, anyway.
Okay, today I learned.
DIL. But yeah, I've been doing open source for a while. I'm a university grad, and when I was at university, I did a lot of like fun open source projects. But it wasn't until I think when I was working at Microsoft that I actually started to do like open source projects other people would use, not just my own stuff that I used github.com as nice free Git hosting for.
Yeah.
So I think I slowly ramped up into it, which is honestly how I recommend most people do it. Learn software and coding and stuff like that. That's very useful. And then instead of trying to immediately jump into really big projects that are exciting, like TypeScript and React and all that, it's oftentimes easier to start with small like plugins or like little utilities and then work your way into bigger, more visible projects, which is generally what I did.
Makes sense. So I don't know how many people this question is going to be relevant to based on the podcast that you're currently on, but you want to just give us a quick overview of like what open source software is, just to make sure everybody's on the same page here.
Yeah, it's useful to standardize terminology.
Yeah.
The way we explain it. So open source, as I would explain it to maybe someone who knows how to code, but nothing else around software. Open source is software that is fully open and can be worked on by anybody. It's not the Wikipedia traditional model where anyone can send a change, but it's a model where anyone can propose a change and they can fully view the source code. There are a few really, really nice benefits from that. One is it makes the software a lot more secure because instead of having one company's, little ad hoc security team, which to be honest, most companies do not fund appropriately, it means that the software has a lot of public interest. And whenever there's a security vulnerability, it can be reported in a secure channel and then fixed very quickly. It means that the software can be a lot more rapidly developed because instead of just one company working on it, you have the whole world. So if you as a user want to make a change, you can send the change yourself, DIY. And then also it means that the software is a lot more understandable because anybody can look at the source. They can learn from it. They can send in pull requests to fix the docs when the docs are incomplete or wrong. And it's just a great learning tool for people who want to say, dive into the React source code and learn how React works. So I'm a big fan of open source, and I think it's had a hugely positive impact on the software industry.
No, I think I completely agree with that. Now, obviously, open source isn't new, but I feel like one of the newer kind of benefits of this open source model that we're starting to see more now with the diversification of talent across the world and different perspectives, and we're seeing this kind of in the AI industry right now with like biased models and stuff like that based on like what training data you give it. If a software is closed source, that software is going to be inherently biased to the types of people working on it, right? Open source, now, of course, it depends on the maintainers and who's accepting changes and all that kind of stuff, right? But open source has that kind of like auxiliary benefit of diverse perspectives contributing to it because it's inherently open to literally every human being on the planet to contribute to, which most closed source is not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. In theory, it is possible that a company that has closed source models or code could have an appropriately diverse set of inputs to that model
Yeah.
and code. In practice, I wouldn't trust any company to do that. I mean, it's capitalism. That's not a a derogative statement. It's just the
Yeah,
financial incentives are not there for a closed source model to be fully progressive, diverse, equitable, and so on. And
exactly.
it's funny, in open source, yes, we remove one of the big barriers to diverse entries, as in anyone can look at the code. That's not the only barrier there. Being able to work in open source necessitates you learn to code, you have the spare time, you have the confidence. You're not someone who, as soon as you put your face on the internet, you get spammed with, doxing and whatnot. So we do still have issues in open source around DEI, but I like to
Mhm.
think that we are well positioned to be able to slowly improve on them over time.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely the. I would even go so far as to say the best positioned out of almost any industry on the planet, right? Just because of the inherent openness of it,
Mhm.
right? And the like, I don't know how like the open source isn't like inherently distant between the people working on it, right? Like you might have like DEI programs and stuff like that in your local community, but someone from like I'm in Canada, right? So someone from South Africa isn't going to be able to contribute to my DEI initiatives, not easily anyway, right? With open source, we don't have that, but there's like a kind of a catch 22 there because it's still just humans. It's still us running open source at the end of the day, right? And we are inherently biased. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
You
interesting.
inherently end up with a lot of the same issues. Cross time zone
Yeah.
communication, cross culture reviews are hard. Like calls to like. So if you have a team that's one particular demographic and it's three of them, it's just inherently easier to onboard a fourth. But I also like to think that by being open, you opens yourself up to more. I don't want to say scrutiny, but open discussions, which means
Mhm.
it's easier to work positively with people to help them, do well in this kind of area.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think we're very well positioned as an industry to do that. So going back to like kind of how you started in open source, you said like, you did a little bit of it during your academic career, it sounded like, right? Or
Yeah.
while you're in academia kind of thing. What were you working on back then? Did you do the whole like little utilities and plugins and like maybe like docs changes and stuff like that? Or were you like, screw it, I'm just going to go build a big open source project?
I did a bit of both.
Okay.
The first open source project that I put real effort into was this ridiculous thing called Full Screen Mario, which was a complete remake, not port, but remake of the original Super Mario Brothers in JavaScript. This is back when the fact that you could do games in HTML5 was like new and incredible and amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that got taken down by Nintendo, but it
Naturally.
was yeah, it was a great experience. Fantastic street cred, honestly. People love hearing about lawsuits. Although it
Oh
was
yeah.
just a DMC, I noticed. Uh,
Yeah.
but it was hosted on GitHub. But no, the actual open source projects I worked on, other than like a game engine spin-off from Full Screen Mario, and then like this cool little meta programming language that I did for fun, were actually around TSLint, which is a library that I helped kill a few years ago, which is an old linter for TypeScript
Okay.
code.
Yeah.
So I started with like use TSLint.
Well, yeah. I started with Angular, right? And direct, like
Mm,
Angular 4 to, I don't know, whatever it was, 9 or 10 or something like that. TSLint was kind of like the default. So I
yeah,
did use TSLint. Yeah.
hell yeah, happy to hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so TSLint was nice. I didn't start off contributing to TSLint a lot itself, although there were like a few like small docs fixes or I think small bugs. But mostly I worked on like kind of community stuff around TSLint because it was easier. There were fewer people looking at it. Eventually, I did start sending more things like feature requests to TSLint, and eventually started contributing to TSLint more regularly and became a maintainer. But it really was a gradual process over time. It's not like I just cannonballed into the deep end.
you, so yeah, it's usually how it works, right? You don't just suddenly create this like big open source project out of
Yeah.
nowhere, right? Um, what are some of like the for someone that's wanting to get into open source, start contributing to it? What are some like tools or skills or
Mm,
whatever? Like where should they start? Like what's the starting point? Give me
It's a
first
great
base
question.
or home
Um,
base, I guess.
yeah, home base.
Yeah.
Um, There are multiple different ways to do this. I will give what I personally find to be works best for me, but I want to be very explicit that if you have another path that works for you, good for you. Great. But what I recommend is that the widest path, the most commonly tread one, is to first learn to code. Um, you don't have to be a programmer, a developer to go into open source. You can do docs, fixes, art design, and so on, PMing. But there's a lot of code, and if you know how to code, it's a lot easier to find a what's called good first issue. So, home to first would be learn to code. First to second, to continue the baseball analogy. The next, the next base would be start writing code that uses other people's code. In the JavaScript ecosystem, that's installing packages on npm or JSR or whatever your registry of choice is.
And,
Uh, npm for
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But just get used to each of the fundamental things. Like I personally try to learn at most one, maybe two things at once. So learn to code, learn how to pull in stuff that's other people's code, learn how to read documentation. And once you've gotten all that, it's a lot easier to start filing like little docs, like, oh, the docs are wrong here, or little bugs like, hey, if I pass this thing and it crashes, types of issues. And once you're good at interacting on GitHub, then start resolving those little bugs or docs fixes. You can do all that at once, but I personally recommend getting good at each one of those if you have the time, because it's a lot easier to do one at a time than to just, as they say, cannonball into the deep end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the I think we've talked about it on the show before, but one of the best things that a first time contributor or like a new contributor to open source can do is realize that you have a unique perspective that
Mm,
everybody else that's currently part of the project will never be able to have ever again.
yeah,
Right? Like when you started using the thing, what did you run into? Right? Because everybody else has already gone past that point, right? So they're blind to these new person problems. It's like, you
yeah,
go to use a new library and the inputs to the function aren't clear enough, aren't described in the documentation, right? Everyone currently using the library knows what the inputs are, but like
yeah,
all the new people don't, right? So like bringing that new person fresh perspective is so unbelievably helpful to projects, and a lot of maintainers are more than happy to accept usually those would be docs changes of some sort, right, or what have you, but they won't be able to see those problems because it's hard to read the label when you're in the bottle, right? When you're
yeah,
just hopping into the bottle, you can see the things that people in your exact position are going to run into that
yeah.
everybody else that already ran into them 4 years ago are never going to see again, right?
I really like that phrase. You can't see the label when you're in the bottle. That's so true. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I can't read the label when you're in the bottle, right? Because you're consumed by it, right? It's like think of like some of the really big maintainers that build the frameworks or like compilers like SWC or ESBuild or stuff like that, right? Like think about how deep in these tools they are, and then you coming into them, you're like, I don't get it. Like I read the getting started and I read the installation, and I'm supposed to be able to execute this line of code, but it doesn't work, right? Get that thing into the docs, work with the maintainer or another contributor member to figure out like why it didn't work, and then go add like maybe it's a note in the documentation or clarify the getting started steps or whatever. Those are
no,
so wildly helpful. Because
strongly agree.
domino effective impact down the road down the line because everybody else trying to get into it now won't run
Yeah,
into that problem, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
strongly agree. It's
love
funny,
it.
I think one of the biggest skills that I've worked on over my career, both in open source and professional jobbiness, is empathy. And I don't just mean like, oh, someone else is sad, I should feel bad for them. I mean like really trying to see through other people's eyes. I,
Well,
as a
that's
project
empathy,
maintainer, am
right?
deep in the weeds. How can I see through, a new user's eyes? Or I'm a new user. I'm trying to explain why I'm having a hard time. How can I do this in a way that will make sense to the maintainer? Like not
Mhm.
just saying it's broken, you suck, but like actually providing an explanation of where I am. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't it's across the board, don't say things like that. But you're right. There's a difference between having sympathy and having empathy, right?
Mm,
Sympathy is the feelings of, oh, I'm sad for you, or sorry you're having help. Whereas empathy is like actually caring about the reason why you're feeling like that. And
yeah.
that's kind of the key.
Jay, I'm learning a lot on this call. First the bottle thing, and now I've never thought of it that way. The difference between sympathy and empathy. That's really good. I like that.
One has a level of understanding, the other doesn't typically.
Hell
Obviously, it's a it depends situation, but
yeah,
as with everything that we usually talk about as software engineers, right? It depends.
it
We're
depends.
just talking about feelings instead.
Well, it
Um,
depends.
yeah, it depends. When did you decide, and what triggered you to decide to work on open source full time? When did you cannonball into it?
When did I
Why?
put on the bathing suit?
Why would you
Uh,
do that to yourself?
I I was on the web platform team at Codecademy, which is a lovely team. I'm still a big fan of the people there and the work they're doing. Which, by the way, a lot of which is open source. You know, the design system called Gamut. And I over time was just getting more and more interested in the open source stuff, like how to really make an impact, not just on what we were doing, because when you're doing corporate work, you're doing it for the company, even if it's broadly applicable to everyone. And I wanted to do the stuff that's applicable to everyone. You know, I wanted to send contributions to first TS-lint and then TypeScript ESLint. I wanted to, make a nice TypeScript template because it was a pain in the rear to set up a new TypeScript repo with all the tools I wanted. And eventually got to the point where I was much more motivated about the open source stuff. I had enough savings, which is a very nice, important thing if you want to get into open source.
Yeah.
Uh, and I built up enough street cred, as they say, talking at conferences and like my blogs and social media profiles and contributing to TypeScript. So it kind of the equation worked out where I was pretty confident that if I were to quit my day job, go to open source full time, I would be able to financially sustain myself like within a year or two. And thank
Right.
heavens I was right about that.
Wow. So you can talk the talk. You talk the
Yeah.
talk and then you walk the walk.
Yes. I should also note I have a spouse. She's wonderful. Shout out Mariah, who has health insurance, which made it a lot more feasible to go open source. I live in the United States of America with
Yes,
a
I assume
healthcare
so.
system of not repute, and that's
Okay.
important.
Usually other people I talk to don't usually have that as a caveat of being able to sustain their lives. Just
Yeah.
just you and your countrymen or
Well,
country people.
God bless America. Uh,
Oh man. Okay. Well, what were some of so those weren't like exactly technical challenges. Those were other challenges. But what technical challenges did you face transitioning into open source full time, if any? It sounded like you had a lot of street cred, so like I'm not really worried about that. But
Yeah, I think that per my previous preference of learning one thing at a time, I had already learned a lot of the things that you need for open source, like the empathy, uh, in both ways as a maintainer and as a user.
yeah,
Networking is really useful. It'll just, if you are a maintainer of important software projects, it will happen unless you force it to not happen. People will file issues on you. You'll see the same names pop up. Eventually, you realize this is like someone who works on Babel or something, which is, by the way, very exciting to me. Whenever I see a maintainer of another open source project I use file an issue on us, I'm like, heck yes, this is great.
that's
I'm
exactly how it's
important.
supposed to work.
Yeah, yeah. But no, as with a lot of software development things, once you learn the fundamentals, a lot of the issues, the challenges then become interpersonal or intrapersonal, like stuff with me.
Yeah.
Managing my time and figuring out what I want to grow on is a lot harder when I don't have a team, mentor, and manager there to support me. It's isolating.
Mhm.
I honestly, I miss having a team. I really miss having other people who I could mentor and be mentored by, and that's just a lot harder to get in open source because there's no one dedicated to the same projects as you in the same way as you.
Maybe we need to start a team. I can bring all these analogies.
Oh yeah,
You can bring the street cred.
great. With our
Perfect.
powers combined, everyone will know everything.
Yeah. So
Two
on
peas in a
the
pod.
two peas in a pod, exactly. We might need a third P. I don't know to balance this out.
Yeah,
To
we'll
mix the
figure it out.
tripod. Yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm sure. Um, so okay, so big topic in open source a lot of the time is like funding, right? Like, how do you
Mhm.
sustain it financially? There's a lot of open source projects that don't get a lot of funding. There's that classic XKCD
Yeah,
where like the thing, all the pieces stack on top of one another, and there's like this tiny little open source project holding the whole thing up at the bottom, right? Like,
yeah.
um, how do you see the open source like funding model now and moving forward? Like, where do you see it going? What have you seen work as a full-time open source maintainer? What
Sure.
are your thoughts on the open source funding model?
I have so many thoughts. You're gonna have to interrupt me at some point. Please do.
I'll cut us off
Um,
as the episode end.
sure. At the 3 hour mark. Yeah.
The 3 hour, exactly. I definitely don't have any work to do today.
Perfect. Yeah. So answering first in order, how do I sustain myself? I wrote a book. Go buy it. Learning TypeScript. It's a great book. Etc. So that's helpful passive income. I started it when I was still working full time. Um, at the beginning, I did some consulting, which is nice, and a lot of open source people do sustain themselves in part through consulting work. Uh, the problem with consulting work is that it takes time away from open source. So unless you're using it as a way to research how people are using your project, or if you can even get consulting budget to work on your project, which is
Yeah,
essentially just a personal sponsorship, well, I cut it out because I want to spend more time in open source.
that's why you did it.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Then there's sponsorships, which are the main thing I get money from. A few different forms of that. I have personal sponsors and GitHub sponsors. Everyone should go sponsor me. I get money through the three main projects that I work on: ESLint, TypeScript ESLint, and Mocha. Mostly TypeScript ESLint. So everyone should also go sponsor those projects. Fun fact: Mocha still exists. Not a,
Yeah,
that's an
it sure
For
does.
those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a really old test framework that's actually still in really common use and surprisingly good. Until I became a maintainer, I didn't have a high opinion of it. Now I do. Um, and then there are kind of aggregators, which I think are really exciting. Things like Stackaid, Thankstead, Dev, Tidelift, where people or companies can send a lump sum per year or month, and then that lump sum gets distributed in some way automatically through their dependencies and
Mhm.
dependencies nested and so on. So I have a few packages that aren't user facing splashy like, TypeScript ESLint, but still get funding through that because a lot of people use them. And I think that's like currently the state of how a lot of people make money in open source. Some combination of maybe consulting, personal slash project sponsorships, and like bulk sponsorships becoming more of a thing over time.
So I have to shout out one of the other episodes that we did. Have you ever heard of polar.sh?
Oh, I have, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we had Burke on for an episode one time, and our conversation was very similar to this one, where it's like, oh, we could talk all day. It was awesome to chat with him about open source and financial incentives and funding and all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't checked out Polar, go check it out. I really like it. I haven't had time to go look into it. I'm not open source full time. I actually have a real job. I work for the man. The man is kind of myself because I'm a co-founder, but I'm still working for the man. So one day I'll go set up my Polar account. But check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard someone refer to the man as themselves before. That's the
I'm
most
like,
enthusiastic and sad
yeah,
simultaneously thing I've ever heard. It's great.
I'm working for the man that is the system, but I'm working for myself as the man,
Yes.
as the one of the owners of the company, but also the man is
Yes.
the system, metaphorically speaking.
Amen. Yes.
Yes. Now I am trying to help charities. So like I do feel kind of okay about, working for the man. I like to think that I'm using the system in a positive way, but that's a discussion for another time. When we have
Yeah.
our three P's in a pod meeting, we can talk about
Yeah.
that.
We'll talk about bolting on for good ideals into a financially motivated system, which honestly, I think it's
Sounds fun.
relevant to the open source discussion because we are
Absolutely.
inherently a system that's money oriented. The goal is money. How do you justify spending money on something like an open source project where it's oftentimes very difficult to quantify direct benefits,
Mhm,
especially in a tool that doesn't directly get used by your team? Like,
mhm.
Tailwind is a great example of they have like the UI components, the theme store. Like they're a fantastic project that also happens to be a model that can relatively straightforwardly be made, sustainable. TypeScript be a slit. Who the hell would pay for that? Like it's not an easy thing to make money
Yep.
off of.
Yeah, yeah, we're in a very interesting industry for that kind of thing, right? Where it's like how do you convince a capitalistic system to pay for something that they could just get for free,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, maybe it's not there in 6 years, but like that is not how companies typically think. six
Yeah.
years down the road, right? It's not like, oh, if we don't fund this thing that we're getting for free right now, then it won't be there in 6 years. It's like that's not a conversation that
Yeah.
works,
No
unfortunately.
financial decision maker will ever be convinced by that. I've
No.
honestly put a lot of thought into this. I think there are like clear things that need to be done in order to put pressure on companies to sponsor open source.
Let's hear
Um,
it.
there needs to be some immediate actionable thing you can do to tell a financial decision maker, hey, if we don't sponsor open source, bad thing will happen.
Hmm.
I don't mean may happen or the industry might get a little worse. I mean will happen to us. And the only thing that comes to mind for that is peer pressure. Like having some kind of like grade, like the restaurants have the ABC or whatever on them.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
there should be some way to make companies publicly accountable for how much money and or employee time they send to open source projects. But no one had, to my knowledge, has had time to make such a system.
No,
So
and
that would be nice.
that would be a feat to
Yeah.
accomplish. Definitely, I completely agree. There's a for like the in the social good space with like when you're typically dealing with like social enterprises or companies that have like more of an some kind of an impact mission. There's what's it called now? A B Corp is the certification that you can get. It's kind of like a stamp of approval that says like your mission you're working towards a positive impact kind of thing. So there's definitely something that could be there for open source users,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like you are contributing back to it, right? So interesting. I like that idea. Um, what are some of the more like you know rewarding aspects of working on open source full time? Like, what do you love about it the most?
It's a good question.
You can only pick like a couple because we don't have
Ah,
time.
there's so many ones. Uh, I like it when I do a feature that improves at least one person who then says they liked it. For starters, I'm a very socially needy person, so getting that validation is nice. But I know that if one person says on like Mastodon or something that it improved their life, then that means a bunch of people would have said
Mhm,
it if they'd gotten around to it. Um, it's bizarre to me to think that I can make things better for whatever tens, hundreds of thousands of developers as part of my job. Like that scale of reach. Like, for example, right now I'm working on TypeScript ESLint, our next major version, making it a lot easier to set up more powerful type linting with better performance. That is
mhm,
going to catch untold scores of bugs in the industry, save untold gajillions of dollars of annoyance and software debt.
mhm.
I'm just it floors me. I'm astounded by the ability to do this, and I really love it.
That's something that's like wildly unique about our industry is
Yeah.
the scope of impact that we can have. Right. So for example, like my dad comes from traditional business, right? He worked like engineering, consulting kind of thing, right? And obviously, like they do tons of revenue, huge projects, massive, dams and roads and bridges and all this kind of stuff, right? But like he's been doing it for decades now, right? He's close to retirement. And the scope of the impact that the companies he's worked at has obviously been large in size, but not large in scope, right?
Mhm.
Whereas, like in our industry, we can build something in a weekend, deploy it the next week, and have thousands of people using it around the world by the following weekend. Right? Like that
Yeah.
scope, that possible scope of impact is like I don't know of another industry that can do that. Right? You're usually
Yeah.
localized and restricted by your um, tangible resources. With us, it's
Yeah.
just click of a couple buttons, and suddenly someone over in another continent can use our code that we wrote on the weekend.
Yeah. It's amazing. The closest analogy that I can think of to explain to people who don't really understand software or open source
Mhm,
is that we're more akin in open source to researchers, like in the academic sense. Like my dad was a mathematician. He worked
mhm,
on like number theory, graph theory, and he published papers. And then sometimes one of his papers would be cited in other papers of like, oh, hey, now that you proved this thing, we can now prove that thing. But
mhm,
instead of proving the ability to color a graph in a particular efficiency, we are now providing you the ability to, catch a new class of bugs or dot dot dot. And because the industry is so new, all the fruits are lower hanging. Like there is a lot of stuff that we actually can do that's never been tried before that we could, push out, as you said, in a weekend. It's very
mhm.
exciting.
And that's just inherently who we are as engineers and developers, right? We want to like, I wonder if this is possible. And then you
Yeah.
like try, you're like, oh, it works. Okay, well, I guess we'll just spend 10 minutes and I'll publish it. And then maybe someone else can use it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then we move on. Then we move on with our lives, right? Or sometimes it explodes. And suddenly you're like, oh no, now I'm making my project.
You can spot an open source maintainer because their reaction to something getting popular might not be positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
to tie things back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that this is part of why I'm really excited about getting a broader range, a more diverse set of inputs into open source. Because it's so open and available for anyone to, publish things, we're only really starting to see the wild and wacky stuff that people can do. Like it's a relatively limited subset of people, of humanity that's been participating in open source. And the more we open it up, the more we expand access to the large communities of open source, the more new ideas can be poured in and the more cool stuff can come out of it. So I think that we're going to see continuing over the next few decades an exponentially better set of stuff to work with, which is I'm also just floored by and I'm very excited for.
Yeah, I mean, the more diversity of thought, the easier it'll be for everybody, right? Like, we just like in a lot of industries, we deal with gatekeepers in
Mhm.
software and open source and stuff like that, right? Like that is unfortunately something that we do still deal with, right? But um, once you can kind of get past that barrier and bring in more diverse thought, it's not just the other people that share that diversified thought that benefit. It's everybody that benefits, right?
Yeah.
So super positive to see um, that kind of stuff happen. I mean, we've seen it in other industries, right? Like if you look back to the early years of like North America and stuff like that, where like women didn't have as many rights as men did, kind of thing, right? Like the world, like a lot of things kind of just got better once they started diversifying access to things to women, right? It's the exact same concept here. It's like once we diversify access to open source or software to these marginalized groups, whether they be, whatever group it is, they're all, in my mind, I'm grouping all of them together kind of thing,
Sure.
right? there's the
That
there's
phrasing won't come back to bite us at all.
no, not at all. My point is that there's a bunch of people that have been doing these things for a very long time, right? And the more people that haven't been part of that group that we bring in, the better off everybody in the resulting group will be, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, I could talk about DEI all day. We're already over time, but I don't care. We're going to keep on going because this
Woo.
is awesome. Yeah. We won't be here for 3 hours, though. I'm sorry. I know you have TypeScript ESLint to build, and I have other things that I'll have to look at my calendar for to figure out what I'm doing after this. So we kind of talked already about like what tools and skills and stuff like that a new contributor should use or should like kind of like learn or have to get into open source. But just some general advice. What general advice would you give to someone that's like, I want to start contributing?
Sure. Don't be discouraged if and when your first contribution is rejected or too hard, something you can't figure out. My first contribution was rejected. I think I was suggesting using a serial or Oxford comma in documentation, and the person said, "I don't care about this." Closed it. What happens for a lot of people is they find a project that they think they want to contribute to, and they send an issue or pull request, and then like nothing happens. It's not maintained, or it's actually so much more complex. Like it tends to take a few tries for many to find that first code fix or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So don't get discouraged. Keep trying. Persistence. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Um,
Good point.
I think another few general tips are read docs, not just like on software or the project you're using, but like if you're ever trying to do something, look up how other people recommend. There are a lot of really nice resources for first time contributors. First timers only is a good one. Good first issue.dev. Um, things that can find good first issues for you are also typically things that link to good documentation, such as like the GitHub docs, which are really nice. And the last point I'll make before I pause is whenever you touch something, highly recommend learn about it. For example, if you're filing issues on GitHub, learn about GitHub issues. What are these label things? What are good practices? If you're sending a pull request, okay, well, what is Git? What is a branch? What is a commit? It's a lot easier to work in a space when you understand the tools. So definitely understand your tools. That would be the last thing I have to say for now.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's kind of key, especially with open source. What there's or just software in general, right? There's so many tools to know, but there's few tools that everybody needs to know, right? Like the core tools. I mean, like I can't think of a single tool that every software needs to know more than Git or
Mhm.
version control in general, whether it be Git or not, whatever people use nowadays. It's not Git. I don't know. Is Curryl still a thing? I don't know.
I
SVN,
think
like
a few companies use other things, but for the most part, open source is pretty much dominated by Git and GitHub,
just Git.
with,
Yeah.
a few notable exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of one thing that everyone has to know. And it's totally fine if you don't know it. Like that's absolutely do not let that be a barrier to you getting into open source. But once you start contributing, it is something that you will have to know, even at a basic level. Like I'm by no means a Git expert. I can do
Mm.
all the very basic things. I can open branches and I can rebase and but like all this fancy Git stuff, you don't need to know that to be able to contribute by any
Yeah.
means. And a lot of maintainers are more than happy, or the documentation or the community around a project is more than happy to help new people. Like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to write this, pull request, or what are your documentation rules and stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah. There's a big principle in software of if you keep having to do a task, try to automate it. And that includes non-coding tasks. If I'm having people coming into one of my libraries go, I don't know how to contribute to this thing, or I don't know what issues I'm allowed. Okay, I could individually answer each of them, or I could realize, wait, this is a failure of documentation. I shouldn't be a bottleneck here. I'm going to write some docs. And I think a good maintainer not just could, but should use that always persistently as an opportunity. There should always be a resource you can point people to for common questions. Like I
Mhm,
personally have a whole blog post with sections that goes through all the different steps of contributing to one of my repos, from finding a good first issue to cloning it locally to writing a pull request. Like that's stuff that if it's not something you as a contributor can easily figure out, um, put a little work in, and if it's still not, then it's a problem on the project side, maybe
mhm.
not yours.
That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Like that first perspective can only happen once per person,
Yeah.
right? So document and automate the failures of the first perspective, and then you'll end up with less of them, right? And then more people can contribute. So yeah, good point. And yeah, I didn't think about that. Definitely some of the onus is on the maintainers too, right? It's not just the first time contributors that are responsible for making sure other first time contributors don't run into the same problems, right? Like if you as a maintainer consistently getting the same questions might be a you problem and not a them problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So okay, any exciting trends or things that you're seeing in open source coming up in the future, short term, long term, whatever? What are you excited about moving forward in terms of open source?
Hmm. I'm excited that people are generally learning about it more. I think more and more developers are starting to think of it as something that's relevant to them.
Mhm,
15, 20 years ago, that was much less the case. It was much more of a divide between corporate and people who care about open source. I think as a result of open source becoming more and more ubiquitous, people are playing better with it. More people understand how to appropriately file an issue on a project,
mhm,
send a pull request, and so on. I think that we're we're getting better writing tools to help people work in open source. So like the idea of like repository templates, or
mhm.
like having forms for GitHub issues, like things like that are making it less and less costly to write open source software. So it's I think just getting to be a better and better understood experience over time. Like that high level is what excites me a lot. On top of any of the individual projects that I'm also excited about.
Yes, well, naturally, I would assume you're excited about the projects that you work on, but yeah, you're right. The more people we can get into it, the better it'll be.
Yeah.
Kind of just the
It's
basic.
wild, like 10 years ago, we didn't have issue forms. And now I'm like, I couldn't possibly maintain a repo without at least 3 to 4 templates for issues.
I know,
It's crazy.
right? It's absolutely crazy. So helpful. Okay, anything you want to promote? TypeScript
Always.
ESLint, we already talked about that quite a bit. You
Yeah.
want to promote, do you want to promote it some more? What's coming up in the next major version? You talked a little bit about it, but
Ooh, ooh, so many breaking
give
changes.
me all the
So
deets.
many. No, no, not very few breaking changes. I'm excited about it. Typed linting is a thing that like within the JavaScript TypeScript ecosystem is it's not new, but it's like getting more and more popular over time. It's the
Mhm.
ability for a set of lint rules to use type information from TypeScript or similar to make much more powerful, helpful suggestions. We're making it a lot easier and faster to type lint in V8. So look forward to a really nice new option that people from the TypeScript team helped us with. Um,
Amazing.
for ESLint, flat config has been released, and we're working on getting the ecosystem up to date. Flat config is a new configuration format for ESLint. It's got a lot of things better than the old legacy configs. For example, you can't have nested config files, which confused everyone and was very hard to work with at scale. So I'm excited about that. And then for Mocha, we're the project was somewhat out of maintenance for a couple of years, so we're stabilizing it and trying to just get it to be like maintained again. We're not doing anything special or fancy anytime soon, but I'm just
Not
excited that
patching.
Mocha is
Yeah.
going to be stable,
I wonder,
stably documented, I should say.
do you know off the top of your head how many gallons it gets? I'm gonna look right now.
I'm gonna look too.
Oh, the internet. Come on. There we go.
7.698 thousand
Million.
weekly
Well,
downloads.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh
7.7
yeah,
million.
sorry, million,
Million. Yeah. Definitely
million.
not
All right,
1,000. That's
not used to operating at that scale.
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
Good
actually,
for
sorry, one
Mocha.
more thing I want to promote. For
Okay.
typed linting, uh, we're overhauling our set of promise-related rules. We have rules that will in TypeScript ESLint that this is like the most nitpicky little in the weeds thing ever. We have rules that'll detect when you're misusing asynchronous code. Like if you create a promise, which is like an async task in JavaScript, and you forget to handle it,
Mhm.
which means if it crashes or rejects, who knows what happens. We'll detect that, but they're kind of hard to use for some. Like some projects are not architected for that type of thing, which made it a pain in the butt to use. So we've been working with folks all around in projects like Node and Redux Toolkit to make it a lot easier to use us to lint for those things. So like we're at the point where it's like quality of life improvements rather than major architectural refactors, which I hope signifies that we're stable and won't break things in the next few majors.
I also hope that. Yeah. I love when my tools don't break my stuff.
Yeah. As much as we love completely overhauling everything every time there's a new major, I hope that we're mostly through that for the ecosystem after year 2024.
Great. Well, I'm excited. I know I use NX for most of my stuff, so I know those provide
Mm,
some migrations for everything, so I don't even need to worry about all these breaking changes. I still need to migrate to the flat configs, though. I haven't done that yet. It's on my list of things to do because I do love cleaner configurations.
mm. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show to chat. I'm sure we will chat again. Well, we need two people. We need to figure out our pod. It
Yeah.
sounds like, and then yeah, maybe throw in a third P. We'll see.
Look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Josh. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Yeah, have a good rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Jay.
You're welcome. See ya.